Welcome to Bedtime Stories. The Wave Maker. Long, long ago, in a time people have forgotten, the waves did not rush in and out the way they do today. Instead, the ocean washed up on the shore and stayed there, and all the clams and crabs and other ocean creatures swam underneath. If only we could catch the clams and crabs, the people grumbled among themselves, what delicious food we would eat. Oh yes, others said longingly. We could eat the seaweed, and weave it, too. On and on they talked, describing the delights beneath the ocean that were out of their reach. The people often were hungry in those days. They knew these things were beneath the ocean. Everyone knew there was an old woman who controlled the tides from the lighthouse in the middle of the oceans. She held a line attached to the ocean in her withered hands, and when she pulled it tight, the tide rose. Sometimes she would tease the people and would let out the line loose. The ocean would rush away, leaving the sandy beach full of crabs and clams, seaweed and driftwood, shells and stones. The people would rush along the beach, picking up all that they could, and then the old woman, with a mocking laugh, would pull back on the tide line. The ocean roared as it covered the sea feast once more. Why won't she let out the tide line? The people asked in exasperation. There is nothing we can do, others answered. The old woman controls our destiny, and if she wants us to starve, we will. Everyone complained, but all they could do was to wait for another day when the old woman might let out loose her line again. At long a raven grew tired of the complaints, tired of the hunger, tired of the long days of waiting. I'm going to fly to the old woman, he announced. I shall convince her that she must bring back the tides. And so Raven, dressed in his blanket of shiny black feathers, he flapped his wings and flew along the coastline. The old woman lived far up the beach, but at last he came to the little cabin at the lighthouse in the middle of the oceans where she made her home. Raven landed and hopped inside. There sat the old woman, the tide line clasped tightly between her gnarled hands. She sat upon a blanket on the ground, her eyes closed. She was dozing in her sleep. She sat as still as a stone, and Raven sat down across from her. Raven began to call her in his loud voice to awake her. What do you want? She asked him without opening her eyes. Oh, nothing, Raven answered, and he rubbed his belly. I only came to tell you how delicious all those clams tasted the last time when you had held the tide line loose. I wanted you to know they were the most wonderful clams I have ever eaten in all my life. The old woman's eyes popped open and she stared at Raven. What do you mean? She asked. What clams? Raven said. Oh my, he said last time, I fear I may have eaten too many clams, which were lying there on the beach for anyone to take, so I did. Now the old woman stood up. What on earth are you talking about? Raven stood up at once and asked. Where are you going? I want to see the beach, she said, and Raven grinned. All right, he said, and moved away. The old woman saw and was shocked to see the people stood by the beach waiting for the tide line to get loosened so that they can get some ocean food for their family and for other birds and creatures flying over the beach. What's this? She cried. At the sight, and to her sorrow and repentance she at once let go of the tide line. When she let the tide line loose, the tide rushed out, and now, all along the beach, for miles and miles, as far as Raven could see, the sand lay bare, the crabs and clams, seaweed and driftwood exposed. Raven hopped down to the beach and began to gather clams. When he looked down the beach, he saw that everyone else was gathering as much as they could carry, as much as they could ever eat. They were singing songs of praise to Raven for the wonderful work they expected, and those who saw him waved to him excitedly. Raven once again flew back to the lighthouse to thank the old woman for her kind gesture. He came to the old woman's side. He said, We all thank you for listening to our grief and sorrows and requesting her, if you will let the tide line out each day, twice a day. We need the riches of the ocean for us and other people. I will let the tide line loose, I promise, the old woman said. So Raven gently, with a gesture of kindness, washed the old woman's eyes with fresh water from her cabin, so she could see clearly the beach and the people waiting for her loosen the tide line. The old woman kept her word, and so it is from that day the waves rushes in and out again twice each day. If you like the story, please do like, share and subscribe. Thank you for listening. Good night.